I ran through the narrow tunnel, my heart pounding like mad, my breath coming in gasps, but I couldn't stop. Ahead, there was a faint light, dim, but my only guide. Behind me, I could hear footsteps. Heavy, uneven. They were getting closer. It was the dog. He wasn't barking or growling, but something in his movements felt foreign, unnatural. "Stop!" a voice called out in the darkness, rough and sharp. I knew it was the dog. He wasn't just chasing me. He was calling my name. This wasn't normal. A dog couldn't speak, yet his voice was real. It cut through the darkness and fear. I kept running, but every time I thought I was almost at the exit, it slipped further away. It was as if the tunnel was endless. My body moved sluggishly, my legs felt like lead, but I couldn't stop. The light ahead flickered, but reaching it felt more and more impossible. The dog was so close now. I could hear his breathing, his steps right behind me. He was near, too near. At some point, I felt like he was about to touch me. A chill of fear ran down my spine. The light ahead was fading, and the darkness behind me thickened. And in that moment, when I thought I couldn't run any longer, I heard him whisper my name. I wanted to scream, but the air caught in my throat. Then I woke up. The silence around me was heavy. I sat up sharply in bed, trying to catch my breath. My heart still pounded and my body shook with fear. My hands slid across the sheets, feeling for the edge of the bed. The room was as dark as it had been in my dream. I exhaled slowly and placed my feet on the floor. The cold wood beneath my feet grounded me in reality. It had only been a dream, but the sensations were so vivid that I couldn't calm down right away. I stood up, feeling my body resist every movement. In the darkness, it was hard to find my balance. My body no longer depended on sight, only memory and caution. What once took mere seconds, like walking to the bathroom, now became a slow and deliberate process. I followed the wall, careful not to lose my way. When I found the door handle, I pushed it open, but my mind was still stuck in the dream. Everything had seemed so real. The dog, the tunnel, that strange voice. But it had just been a nightmare. Or at least, I hoped it was. In the bathroom, I turned on the water. The cool streams touched my hands, and I ran my palms over my face, trying to wake up. My sense of touch was the only thing I could rely on. I found the towel and wiped my face. I thought I would have been used to this darkness by now, but everything still felt unfamiliar. When I finished, I returned to the closet where I kept my clothes. I felt around for my shirt and pants, trying to keep my balance. Every movement was slow, deliberate, and I had to rely on my memory and instinct. As I made my way down the stairs, I heard someone enter the house. It was my sister, Emma. She came by every day to help me. I knew it was hard for her to see me like this, but she never let it show. "Good morning," she said, stepping into the room. "Morning," I replied, trying to sound upbeat. But inside, everything trembled with exhaustion and helplessness. We sat at the table. I heard her set a cup down in front of me. "How are you?" Her voice was calm, but I could sense the underlying worry. "The usual," I said. "It's hard." We sat in silence, each lost in our thoughts. Flashes of that day came back to me. It had been an ordinary morning, no different from hundreds of others. I was driving home after a long day, rushing as usual, thinking about the countless things waiting for me at home. But in a second, everything changed. Time seemed to slow. I remember the screech of tires, the bright headlights that blinded me for a moment, and the sharp impact that threw my body forward. Everything spun around. I heard glass shattering, and I felt the car flip over. The next thing I remember was pain and darkness. I couldn't open my eyes, and my head throbbed. It felt like I was sinking into some thick void where there was no time, no place. Only darkness surrounded me. When I woke up in the hospital, everything was still dark. I didn't understand what had happened at first. The doctors talked about my injuries, about the surgery I had undergone. But the main thing I heard was that I would never see again. I was blind. Since then, I hadn't been able to adjust to this new reality. Every day reminded me of what I had lost. I was trapped in a world without light, and I didn't know how to move forward. All my plans, my dreams, everything was destroyed in an instant. Emma, my sister, pulled me from my thoughts with her soft voice. "You can't stay here alone," she said. "You need more help than you're willing to admit." I sat across from her, listening as she gently but firmly tried to explain that I couldn't handle things on my own. "I can't be here every day," she continued. "You need friends, family. You shouldn't isolate yourself." I clenched my fists, feeling the irritation rising inside me. I hated hearing that I was helpless now, that I couldn't manage without someone's pity. I had been independent my whole life, and now I was being told to give that up. "I can manage," I said through gritted teeth. "I don't need anyone's pity." "It's not pity," she said softly. "It's care. We all want to help you, but you can't keep ignoring reality." "I don't need help," I repeated. She fell silent, and a heavy quiet filled the room. I knew she was just trying to be kind, but at that moment all I felt was anger and helplessness. When Emma left, the house fell back into silence. I sat in the kitchen, listening to sounds I had never noticed before. The drip of water from the faucet, the wind outside the window, the creak of the chair beneath me. All these sounds reminded me that my world had changed. Now all I had left was sound and touch. My world had shrunk to these two senses. I ran my hand across the table, feeling its smooth surface. Simple things like the feel of wood under my fingers had once meant nothing to me. But now, it was everything I could perceive. I could no longer see the morning light flooding the kitchen, couldn't look out the window at people passing by, couldn't enjoy the simple things. Blindness had taken everything from me. I hadn't just lost my sight, I'd lost my entire life. I used to be active. I ran, swam, even participated in marathons a few times. My job involved managing projects where I had to make quick decisions, react to changes. Now all of that was gone. I couldn't do the things I loved anymore, and I didn't know how to move forward. This darkness I had fallen into felt endless. Every day was a struggle. I was trying to get used to this new body, one that couldn't do what had once felt so easy. I didn't want to admit it, but deep down, I knew I was lost. I clenched my hands into fists, feeling the despair rise within me. This new life felt foreign, and I didn't know how to find my place in it. The rest of the day, I spent trying to accept that everything was going to be different now. Things that once seemed routine now demanded special attention. I started organizing objects around the house in a way that made them easier to find. The phone, which had always been on the nightstand, now had to be in a specific spot. Small things like keys, the charger, even a glass of water, everything had to be exactly where I'd remember it. This became a sort of ritual, necessary to keep from losing myself in my new life. Everything felt foreign. I could no longer just walk up to the table and grab something. Every time I had to stop, think about every movement. Everything became slow, deliberate, as if I was learning to live all over again. One of the hardest challenges was learning Braille. Emma had left me some study materials that she had gotten from a specialist who worked with the blind. I sat at the table and began running my fingers over the raised dots on the paper, trying to understand how the system worked. My sense of touch, which had once seemed insignificant, had now become my eyes. The letters seemed confusing to me. Each combination of dots represented a separate letter or number, and I had to memorize them by touch. It was harder than I expected. I tried to concentrate, but each time I felt helpless when my fingers couldn't tell which letter was in front of me. Frustration crept in, like everything I was doing was pointless. I set the textbook down on the table and pressed my fingers to my temples, trying to calm myself. It was only the first day of my independent life, and I already felt like it was turning into a battle. Deep down, I knew I had to be patient, but patience was the last thing I had left. I grabbed my phone, the one recently set up to work with voice commands, and tried to remember how to dial a number using spoken instructions. I gave commands and the phone responded, but even that felt like a struggle. The machine did everything I told it, but the process lacked the speed and convenience I once had. Even a simple task like sending a message required more effort than ever before. By evening, I felt exhausted. My eyes, though I couldn't see, seemed to tire, adding weight to this already heavy state. The entire day had been spent trying to control my surroundings, but in the end I realized it was all just an illusion of control. This new life, where I could neither see people nor the world around me, felt like a kind of imprisonment. Finally, I decided to go to bed. Silence once again enveloped the house as I slowly made my way to the bed. I had to rely on touch again, recalling the placement of furniture and objects in the room. When I finally lay down, I felt drained. It seemed like the day had lasted forever. Closing my eyes, I tried to push away thoughts of helplessness, but they haunted me. I knew there were thousands more days like this ahead of me. Yet instead of those thoughts, something else returned, the memory of that nightmare. The dog. Large, foreign, and still there. My heart started to race, and as I drifted into sleep, it all started again. I was running through that narrow tunnel once more. Fear clung to every step. The light ahead flickered, but I couldn't reach it. Behind me, those same footsteps echoed again. The dog was chasing me. Waking up this morning, I was once again immersed in the same routine. The darkness that now surrounded me was as impenetrable as ever. I knew the new day would bring only the same struggles and attempts to adapt to life without sight. A growing sense of self-pity settled within me, something I couldn't shake. I had to repeat all those exercises again, arranging things, trying to learn to navigate my own home. Yesterday, I had spent the entire day trying to learn Braille, but now it seemed so pointless. All I had was darkness and despair. Living blind was hard, and it felt like it would only get worse. Suddenly there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. In the silence of the apartment, the knock sounded unexpectedly loud, as if it were invading my little world. A moment later, a voice followed. "It's me. Open up." I heard Alex's familiar voice. Alex and I had been friends since childhood. We'd been through a lot together, and I knew I could always count on him. But ever since I lost my sight, Our interactions had become rare. I often refused his help, preferring to manage on my own. But today it seemed he had another purpose. "Come in," I said, listening to the door slowly open. I heard his footsteps, but then I noticed something else, a quiet, barely noticeable sound. It was a whine. I strained my ears, trying to figure out what was going on. "Who's that?" I asked, feeling uneasy. I didn't like surprises, especially now that my life depended on others. "It's a dog," Alex said calmly. "I brought you a guide dog." I froze. Blindness had given me time to adjust to this new world, but Alex's proposal knocked me off balance. A guide dog? Was he serious? How could a dog help me? And what if it didn't work? Before I could voice my doubts, Alex continued. "I know you didn't want to discuss this, but I need you to hear me out. I brought someone from the shelter with me. It's one of the leading organizations that train guide dogs. I understand that you wouldn't go yourself, so I brought him here to explain everything." The man standing behind Alex stepped forward and introduced himself in a calm, professional voice, though with a touch of warmth. "My name is John, and I've been working with guide dogs for many years," he began. Alex and I arranged for an introductory meeting. This dog is already trained to assist people with vision loss. We just want to show you how it works and offer you the chance to try it. There's no commitment right now. This is just an introduction. My first instinct was to refuse. But Alex spoke sincerely, and I knew he was trying to help. Inside, I felt a sense of resistance, but I couldn't ignore the fact that my friend and this man were here to help. "I'm not sure," I said, trying to be honest. "It's too much. I'm not used to this." Alex didn't back down. "I'll be here with you. We'll just give it a try, okay? I'll help you get used to it. It's not a final decision. You'll see for yourself how useful he can be." My resistance began to weaken. "I know how you feel right now," he said. "It might seem like an intrusion, but I want you to understand. This dog can give you back your freedom, help you feel confident again. I'm not forcing you, we just want you to try. If you don't like it, we'll stop." John, the man from the organization, supported him. "These dogs are trained to help with daily life. They can alert you to obstacles, find safe routes, and their primary job is to ensure your safety. Today is just an introduction, and if you feel like this could be helpful, we'll help you with the next steps. You'll go through training, and we'll match you with a dog specifically for you." I stood still, weighing their words. But at the same time, I knew Alex was right. He always knew what was best for me, even if I didn't want to admit it. "If I agree, how will this work?" I finally asked. "If it doesn't suit you, no one will force you to continue," Alex said. "But I'm sure you'll see how helpful it can be. And I'll be here to help you take care of the dog until you get used to it. It doesn't have to be hard." I sighed, feeling the inner struggle give way to cautious agreement. "All right, let's give it a try," I said at last. The whole time, the dog sat quietly beside us, as if waiting for my decision. Once everything was settled, John said his goodbyes, reminding me that if I had any questions, I could reach him through Alex. He promised to return in a few days to see how the introduction was going, and he reiterated that there were no obligations at this stage. "Just give it a try. Give yourself some time," John said as he left. Alex walked him to the door, then came back to me. "Well, how do you feel?" he asked, sitting down beside me. "I don't know," I answered honestly. It's hard to say. This all feels so sudden. Alex smiled slightly. It'll be all right. You'll get used to it. Everything will be okay. We sat in silence for a while. The dog sat motionless in the corner, as if understanding that his presence was something new for me. Alex stroked his head, then looked at me. "I need to step out for a bit," Alex said as he stood up. "Let him get used to the house while I'm gone. I won't leave you alone for long. If anything happens, call me." I nodded, though doubt crept back inside me. But still, this was a first step, and I had to try. After Alex left, I felt a bit lost. The guide dog sat in the living room, motionless, as if understanding that this place was now his new task. My mind was still swirling with thoughts of what my life would look like from now on. I was trying to get used to the idea that I would have to rely on an animal, but it wasn't an easy decision. Sometime later, there was a knock at the door. I got up and cautiously made my way down the hallway, following the sounds. Opening the door, I heard a familiar voice. "Good afternoon," said the doctor from the rehabilitation center who had been helping me after my release from the hospital. "How are you doing?" "Hello, doctor. Come in," I replied, stepping aside to let him in. We sat in the living room and the doctor noticed the dog. "I see you've got a guide dog," he said approvingly. "That's a big step. This will help you regain some of your independence." "Yeah, my friend brought him over," I said, feeling a bit self-conscious. "But I'm not sure how this will help yet. Honestly, I'm still trying to adjust to it." The doctor smiled. "That's normal. Adjusting to blindness is no simple process, and the dog will help you not only physically but emotionally as well. He'll become a loyal companion, and you'll need to learn to work together. Believe me, it will be easier than it feels right now." We discussed my condition, how I was managing day-to-day life, and the challenges I was facing. I told him about my attempts to navigate the house, my fear of losing things, and the constant sense of helplessness. "Adjusting to blindness is difficult," the doctor agreed, "but you'll gradually regain control." He gave me some advice on how to care for myself and work with the guide dog. "You need to give him a command when you're ready to move," he explained. "It's also important to learn to trust the dog, but remember, he has to sense your confidence. When you're outside, he'll watch your steps and react to any potential dangers." After the doctor left, the day seemed to come to an end too quickly. The dog remained in the living room, and I, exhausted from the events of the day, decided to go to bed. It was one of those days where emotional fatigue overwhelmed me faster than the physical kind. I lay down in bed, trying to calm my thoughts. The dog was quietly breathing in the living room, and his presence, though new to me, was somehow reassuring. Perhaps the doctor was right, and the guide dog really could help me return to a normal life. However, when I closed my eyes, the nightmare returned. I was running through the same dark tunnel. The walls around me felt too narrow, and every step echoed. Once again, I couldn't find a way out, and the light ahead, which seemed like an exit, only drifted further away. The footsteps behind me drew closer. I heard something approaching. It was that strange dog again. He was chasing me, and this time I couldn't ignore him. His breathing became clearer, as if he was right next to me. "I found you." The voice was so close it made my skin crawl. "Now I'm here." I tried to run faster, but the dog caught up to me. I woke up abruptly as if something had yanked me out of the dream. My heart was pounding, as if it were trying to burst out of my chest. I lay still, listening to the silence around me. The room was steeped in darkness, like the rest of the house, and for a moment I thought everything was fine. But something wasn't right. A sharp odor hung in the air, a mix of dampness and something else I couldn't identify. The smell was strange, unpleasant, like something was decaying nearby. It was different from any of the usual scents I had become accustomed to in my home. It felt foreign, like it didn't belong here. I strained my ears, trying to pick up the faintest sound. The room was too quiet, so quiet it was unsettling. In the silence, I heard something that made my whole body tense. Breathing. Not the familiar sound of my guide dog's breathing, but something rougher, heavier, as if someone were struggling to draw breath. My mind began painting pictures of what could be nearby. There was a sense of presence, something large, heavy, lurking just a few steps away. A chill ran down my spine, and I instinctively clenched my fists under the blanket. I lay frozen, trying to breathe as quietly as possible, but the heavy breathing didn't stop. It filled the room, becoming more distinct with each passing moment. Footsteps? No, not footsteps. Something else. Something I couldn't quite recognize. The breathing was slow, and with every sound, I felt the fear gripping my mind more tightly. Internally, I began to feel around the space around me. I knew there shouldn't be anyone else in the room but me. But that presence, it was here. It was watching me. I could swear I felt something moving, shifting in the corner of the room. I slowly propped myself up on my elbows, listening as the breathing grew louder. The smell of dampness and something animalistic still enveloped me, and the rough, uneven breathing from the darkness made my heart seize with terror. And then I heard a voice, raspy, heavy, as if it struggled to push through something primal and wild. Yes. The voice seemed to fill the room with cold. You're right. You figured it out. You know who I am. Each word carried an eerie confidence, as if this creature was savoring my fear. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I just lay there, listening to this nightmare that had become real. I've come for you. Those words hit me like a hammer. I was overwhelmed by the feeling that I no longer belonged to myself, that my entire existence now depended on this creature. Thoughts began racing through my mind. How had it gotten here? Why? What was it? Was it the same beast from my dream, or was it my guide dog? But everything felt too real, too terrifying. I tried to push past the fear and barely managed to ask, "Who are you?" The answer came immediately, as if the creature had been waiting for my question. It doesn't matter who I am. What matters is what I want. I felt the room grow smaller, as though the walls were closing in and the air was thickening. 5, it said quietly, but with emphasis on each letter. What? 5? I stammered, barely audible. My voice trembled, just like my thoughts, scattering in the darkness. 5 victims, the voice deepened, and I felt my muscles tense. You will give me 5, and then I will give you your eyes. You'll see again. 5 victims, and you'll return to your old life. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing. 5? Victims? What did it mean? I began muttering, barely aware of what I was saying. What victims? The darkness let out a laugh, though it was so quiet and deep that it sounded more like a heavy sigh. A sacrifice, came the reply. You will choose them yourself. You will decide who I take as an offering, and in return, I will give you back your sight. I couldn't find any words. This entire situation felt unreal, like an endless nightmare I couldn't wake from. Sacrifices? How could I even begin to think about something like that? But the voice, heavy and creeping, continued to break down my sense of reality. "You have one day," the creature's raspy voice said. "By tomorrow night, you must tell me who I will devour first. If you don't give me a name, I will start with your friend, the one who brought me to you." My thoughts spiraled into chaos. Alex. He was talking about Alex. This creature was threatening his life. I couldn't fully grasp what was happening, but fear held my body in a vice, stopping me from saying anything. I lay still, tense, while the creature continued speaking with icy calmness, as if it knew I had no way out. "You will give me a name," it whispered, and I could feel a sinister tenderness in its voice. "Or your friend will be the first sacrifice." I couldn't breathe. My thoughts whirled wildly, but none offered any salvation. I felt cornered. What could I do? Suddenly, something touched my face. It was cold and damp. I froze when I realized the creature was licking me. Its rough tongue slid across my skin, and I felt a wave of nausea. "You're delicious," the creature whispered, savoring the words. "I've memorized your scent." Its breathing slowed, and then I heard it move toward the door. Its paws slid silently across the floor, and soon the room fell back into silence. But it was a silence filled with terror and dread that wouldn't leave me alone. My heart continued to race, and my thoughts were a chaotic mess. What was that thing? Why was this happening to me? Why had it chosen me? I felt trapped, unable to run, unable to change anything. I didn't know what to do. Hundreds of questions spun in my head. Alex. Why had he brought that creature into my home? He couldn't have known what that dog really was. I tried to recall what he had said about the guide dog. There hadn't been any hint of suspicion in his voice. Was it just a horrible coincidence? Or did Alex actually know something? But no, I couldn't believe that. He was my friend. He would never hurt me. He would never set me up like this. Or maybe it was that man. John. Did he know the dog was dangerous? Was this his plan? I could be wrong, but the most important question was, what do I do now? The creature had demanded a name, a victim's name. I had to give it someone, or it would take Alex. But how could I choose? How could I decide who to give up to die? Fear and helplessness gripped me. I couldn't choose. I couldn't take that step. But what if I didn't name anyone? It would return. And then what? Would it kill me, or worse, take Alex? My thoughts kept circling back to that monstrous ultimatum. It was like an endless argument in my head. Part of me tried to find a way out, some way to avoid this choice, but another part of me knew there was no escape. The creature wouldn't leave me alone. It had already come for me, and now my future was entirely in its hands. Remembering its words, I shuddered. The nature of this beast was so far beyond anything I could have imagined. It wasn't just threatening. It spoke of sacrifices as if they were routine, like it was a simple transaction, with no room for emotion or hesitation. But I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready to be part of such a game. What was I supposed to do? Run. But where? I was blind. Without help, I wouldn't survive. And if I stayed here, what awaited me? The creature already knew me, my scent. It knew my weaknesses. How long could I hide when it decided to come for me again? I lay in bed, clinging to every sound in the house. Every creak, every breath made me jump. I couldn't sleep. Fear had grown so large that it seemed to take over my entire consciousness. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was paralyzed. Time seemed to stand still. I had no idea how long I lay there in that anxious silence, contemplating my fate. My mind searched for ways to save myself, but none came. And with each passing moment, I felt myself sinking deeper into the abyss of despair. Suddenly, a voice cut through the silence, pulling me out of my fear-stricken state. "Hey, are you alive? You in there?" It was my sister. Her voice was soft and calm, but it echoed like thunder through the nightmare. I hadn't realized the night had already passed. Hearing my sister's voice, I was immediately filled with fear. But it wasn't for myself. It was for her. The creature, that dog, was downstairs, and now it could be a threat to her. I had to stop her no matter what. My heart pounded in my chest and my hands shook, but I got up, quickly turning toward the stairs. My body, stiff from hours of stillness, responded with pain. I stumbled, falling to the floor and slamming my elbow against the door. The dull thud echoed through the quiet room, but I didn't have time to think about the pain. I pulled myself up, clutching the wall, and began moving down the stairs, leaning on the railing. Ahead, I could hear my sister's voice, but my fear for her outweighed the pain. "Oh, aren't you sweet?" I heard her cheerful voice. My heart froze for a moment. I took a few more careful steps down, trying not to fall. She had no idea who or what she was in the room with. She could be in danger, and I had to warn her. But every thought of possible danger only paralyzed me further. "What's your name? Alex told me about you." She kept talking, her voice light and playful. I slowed down as I neared the bottom of the stairs. Her tone, her laughter, none of it suggested anything was wrong. My mind frantically tried to pick up on any sign that something was off, but judging by her voice, nothing was happening. The creature wasn't showing any aggression. Maybe she was even petting it. I took another step, leaning against the wall, and forced myself to speak. "Emily, come here." Her voice softened as she noticed how worried I looked. "Did you just wake up?" She suddenly stopped speaking, and I heard her voice change. "Hey, why do you look so scared? What's wrong? You look awful." "I didn't sleep well," and I struggled to get the words out. "You weren't expecting me?" Emily cut me off. "We were supposed to go shopping today. Are you ready?" A wave of panic rose in my chest. I needed to warn her, but at that moment, a low, menacing growl sounded. It was the same growl I had heard during the night. The beast was making itself known again. I froze, knowing that any wrong move could escalate the situation. "Don't go near him, come to me," I whispered, trying to keep my voice calm. Emily, sensing the change in my tone, frowned. "What's going on with you? Why are you so tense?" She started moving toward me, but I knew I couldn't make any sudden moves or say anything that might alert the creature. The dog growled again, and I realized if I told her the truth about what had happened last night, it could lead to disaster. The creature knew I might expose its secret, and it was ready to strike. No, I said hastily. "Everything's fine. I just wanted to discuss what we need to buy, where we're going. Nothing serious." Emily still hesitated, but her expression softened. She seemed to believe I was just being overly anxious. "All right," she replied, relieved. "Let's figure it out and you can get ready. We need to leave early." I nodded. though my heart continued to race. I was supposed to go out with my sister today, but the thought of taking this dog, or whatever it was, along seemed impossible. Every time I thought about its menacing growl, the way its breath came in heavy gasps in the night, fear gripped me. After what had happened last night, I simply couldn't take any risks. "Are we taking him with us?" Emily asked, her voice light and casual. My chest tightened, but I couldn't let her see how frightened I was. I needed to come up with something quickly. "No," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Alex said he'd come by later and feed him. He promised to take the dog for a walk, so we don't need to worry." "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice uncertain but not suspicious. "It's better if he stays with you. You're supposed to be getting used to him." "Yes, I'm sure," I replied, bending down to check my cane, pretending I was focused on that. "There's no need to take him. Alex will handle everything." Emily glanced at me, but thankfully she accepted my explanation. I knew that if she had pushed, I might have cracked and revealed my anxiety. But even as I convinced her, I wrestled with the thought of leaving the beast alone in the house. We left, the house and the dog fading into the distance, and only once we were on the road did I begin to think more clearly. If the dog had planned to attack Alex, it would have done so by now. In all the time Alex had spent with him before bringing him to me, nothing had happened. That meant Alex wasn't its target. My thoughts returned to last night. This beast clearly wanted something more, but Alex wasn't part of the plan. Until nightfall, I repeated to myself. I had until night to make a decision. I couldn't let Alex get hurt, but at the same time I couldn't imagine who I could offer up as a sacrifice. That thought haunted me all day, and every time it surfaced in my mind, I felt the darkness closing in tighter around me. We got home by late afternoon. All day, I hadn't been able to relax. The fear from last night's conversation with the creature hadn't left me. When we walked into the house, a tense silence hung in the air. Alex was already there, the dog lying next to him as if nothing had happened, its head resting on its paws, watching us with those strange eyes. But there was none of the aggression from the night before. It seemed like an ordinary dog. "Hey!" Alex smiled, getting up and walking toward me. "I fed him like I said I would. Everything okay?" "Yeah, everything's fine," I replied, trying to keep up the appearance that I had things under control. I couldn't just ask Alex what was really going on. The dog was here. It could hear us talking. I needed to find a moment when we could be alone, without that thing nearby. "Can we talk?" I asked casually, doing my best to keep my voice calm. "Sure about what?" Alex asked, sitting back down. "Not here. Maybe we could step outside for a minute? I want to discuss something in private." Alex looked at me with mild surprise but didn't say anything. He stood up and gestured for me to follow him. We stepped outside, leaving the dog behind, and I felt a bit of the tension ease, if only for a moment. I had a feeling the dog wouldn't let us go too far. But for now, I just needed a little time away from its presence. We stopped near the house, and I heard Alex let out a noisy breath, stretching his arms behind his head. "So, what did you want to talk about?" he asked. My heart pounded. I didn't know how to start. Should I tell him everything that happened last night? That his dog talked to me and demanded sacrifices? He wouldn't believe me. But something told me I had to tread carefully. That dog. I swallowed. "Are you sure there's nothing wrong with him?" "What do you mean?" Alex tensed. "What are you talking about?" I could feel the change in his voice. He hadn't expected that question. "It's just..." I searched for the right words. I can't explain it, but I feel like something's wrong. There's something strange about him." Alex looked at me in confusion, and I heard him take a step toward me. "What do you mean? He's just a dog, and a good one at that. You've seen him yourself. He's just a guide dog." "I know, but still, something doesn't sit right with me," I repeated, trying not to let my nerves show. "I feel like this dog isn't the right fit for me." Alex frowned but said nothing. I realized I had to be more careful. I couldn't just blurt out what had happened last night. He wouldn't believe me. Or worse, he'd think I was losing my mind. But I had to find a way out of this situation. "Can we return him?" I continued, choosing my words carefully. "I mean, maybe I should go back to the center and pick another dog?" "Return him?" Alex looked at me in mild disbelief. "I thought you liked him." "I do, but..." I tried to find a convincing reason. "It just feels like he's not for me. Like we don't match. Maybe it's better to find one I feel more confident with." Alex thought for a moment. My tone was too tense, and he could tell. "Listen," Alex started cautiously. "If you want, I can contact the shelter. We can discuss it with them and find another dog for you. But are you sure it's the dog that's the issue?" At that moment, I heard a faint but unmistakable sound from the house. The soft tap of claws on stone. A sound I couldn't mistake for anything else. The guide dog had come out of the house and was heading straight toward us. I froze, my whole body tensing as a wave of anxiety hit me. Why had it come out now? The dog approached and stopped by Alex's feet. I heard him smile as he leaned down to pet the animal. "Ah, smart boy," Alex said softly, his voice full of admiration. I felt my heart drop. It was obvious the dog had interrupted our conversation on purpose. It didn't want me asking questions, and now it stood there like a shadow, watching every word I said. I couldn't allow myself to continue this conversation. Panic began to overwhelm me. "Yeah, everything's fine," I quickly replied, feeling my head grow heavy with thoughts and my heart tighten with fear. Maybe I just need more time. Blindness isn't exactly an easy adjustment. Alex was silent for a moment, petting the dog, seemingly unaware of my internal turmoil. "I understand," he said finally. "But if anything doesn't feel right, you can always reach out to me." "All right," I nodded, trying not to let my anxiety show. "Let's do that, but maybe later. I need some time to think things through." "Okay, don't push yourself too hard," Alex said, patting me on the shoulder. "I'm here if you need anything." I nodded, but inside I was boiling with fear. The dog wasn't leaving us, keeping close, watching my every move, and it was clear that the situation was spiraling out of control. When Alex turned and called to the dog again, it obediently followed him, as if nothing strange had happened. Everything seemed normal, but I knew the truth. This creature, this beast, was hiding under the guise of innocence. And now the most important question stood before me. Whose name would I give it tonight? Who would I sacrifice to save my life? Alex smiled, adjusting the strap on his bag. As always, he was calm, confident that I was safe. "All right, buddy. I'll come by in the morning. I'll help you with the dog and everything else. You'll be okay tonight, right?" "Yeah, of course," I mumbled, feeling the icy grip of fear tighten around my heart. Alex said goodbye and left, leaving me alone in the silence. I stood on the doorstep, knowing that the creature was watching me. His eyes were fixed on me. Even though I couldn't see them, I felt their gaze on my skin, in every fiber of my being. When the door closed, time began to count down the last hours until midnight. I returned to my room. The heavy silence filled the house, and the thought that midnight was approaching weighed on me more with each passing moment. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't just give a name, but I couldn't do nothing either. The creature would come for an answer. With every minute, with every ticking of the clock, the fear became unbearable. Time dragged on endlessly as if mocking me, and finally the clock struck midnight. I tensed, waiting, and then I heard it. Quiet, but heavy footsteps. The sound slowly drew closer, and with every step, my heart pounded harder. Suddenly, the air in the room filled with heavy, ragged breathing. But it wasn't the kind of breathing an ordinary dog would make. This sound was more like the breath of a beast, something darker, raspier, as if it came from another world. The smell shifted. There was now a stench of rotting dampness and something metallic. I froze. The footsteps stopped right in front of me. I couldn't see the beast, but I could feel it. The room was filled with a pressure, as if the space had shrunk and the air had grown thick. I could hear every movement it made. The soft shuffle of its paws on the floor, a low growl, a prelude to whatever was about to happen. The beast was here. Cold sweat covered my skin as I heard its voice, low and raspy, cutting through the silence. Your sister has a scent just as alluring, as delicious as yours. My heart clenched and I jumped up from the bed. "Don't touch her," I shouted, trying to keep my voice firm, but it betrayed me, cracking with fear. In response, I heard a soft, ragged laugh. The sound wasn't human. It was full of mockery and animalistic hunger. I stood in total darkness, listening as it continued. "You've disappointed me." I wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. What did it mean? Why was it disappointed? "The people I've made these deals with before, they always resisted. They screamed, tried to run, told others about me. Some even tried to poison me, to kill me. Human foolishness." It paused for a moment, as if giving me time to process its words. Every word echoed inside me, bringing fresh waves of fear. In the silence, I heard the beast take another step closer. "But you," it continued, "you did nothing. You stayed silent. You waited for the next night. A rare case, but it happens. You're smart. But it's boring. I expected more. A fight, resistance. Instead, you just accepted it." Its voice dripped with sarcasm, as though it was savoring my fear. I felt my knees trembling. Could I even say anything at all? I knew that if I stayed silent now, it would start killing. Maybe by tomorrow my sister would be gone. Then my friend. But I was here, waiting through the night, and it was still waiting for my answer. It had given me a chance. "Say the name." Its voice grew softer, but even more threatening. "You know what will happen if you don't. So who should I eat first?" My heart was beating so hard it felt like it would burst out of my chest. I realized this might be my only chance to get some answers. Maybe I could understand what I was dealing with. Gathering all my strength, I spoke, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'll give you a name, but I want to know who you are. What are you? Why me? Why did you choose me?" After a long pause, I heard it laugh quietly, the sound vibrating through the air, echoing in my mind. "You're curious," it finally said. "For someone so afraid, you're quite curious." I tried to keep my composure, but the fear gripped my entire body. It was hard to make sense of what was happening. The beast's laughter, its words, it was all too strange, too unreal, yet at the same time, unbearably real. "But I'll answer your question," it continued, taking another step closer. "I didn't choose you. I was brought here. Circumstances, you could say. But now that I'm here, I've decided to play with you." Those words hit me like a hammer. Play with me. My legs began to shake. Was this really happening? Was this a game? "It's all just a game," the creature said coldly. "The sacrifices, the deal, 5 names, it's all just for fun. You didn't think I really needed sacrifices, did you? No, it's all for my amusement." My heart skipped a beat. I felt utterly helpless. Everything that was happening, this was all just part of its cruel game. Human lives, my life. Was all of this just entertainment for it? "Stop wasting my time." The beast's voice turned colder, sharper. "You give me a name, and we continue our game. Or I start playing with you." A chill ran through me. I heard the heavy steps of the beast getting closer. There was a threat in its breath. It could pounce on me at any moment, and I knew it. I shrank back, feeling cornered. My thoughts scrambled. Names, I needed to think of names. Colleagues, acquaintances, maybe criminals, or enemies. Who could it be? Who could I offer as a sacrifice? Maybe someone who had hurt me. Someone I hated. But there was no time. I heard the beast coming closer. Its laughter grew louder, terrifying me to my core. I was scared, and I didn't know what to do. I could feel every heavy step it took, its breathing growing more beastly, more ragged with every passing second. Inside, everything was tightening with fear, but I knew this was my only chance. I had to offer something to distract it from the inevitable. Frantic thoughts raced through my mind. No plan, just instinct and a desperate attempt to stay alive. Its mouth opened in front of my face, and I could smell its foul breath. Another second, and its fangs would sink into my helpless flesh. Time seemed to slow as I tried to find a way out, and then, like a flash, an idea hit me. Oh God, what if I had to try? I had to take the risk. I couldn't wait for it to kill me. The words tumbled out of my mouth, though I tried to sound confident. 5 names. My voice trembled, but I forced it to sound steady, almost defiant. That's too easy, don't you think? The creature stopped. I couldn't see its face, but I knew it was listening. The air in the room grew heavy, like the calm before a storm. "You want a real game, don't you? A challenge where you can enjoy the hunt, have some fun. Just showing up and killing, isn't that too boring for you? Am I right?" I paused, trying to gauge its reaction. Silence. Then suddenly, laughter. Quiet, piercing, mocking laughter. The creature's raspy voice echoed off the walls. "You want to offer me a game?" There was mockery and contempt in its voice. "You're really that foolish to think you can play with me? I could tear you apart right now." The beast's laughter made me clench my fists. But I didn't flinch, didn't let it show that it rattled me. I knew that if I didn't offer something worthy, it would do exactly that. Tear me apart. "You're not just a beast," I said, barely holding back the tremor in my voice. "I can feel it. I'm blind, but I'm not a fool. You're after something more. Hunting for the sake of hunting won't satisfy you completely. Is it really that entertaining to kill a helpless victim? You want something more significant, a challenge, something that tests you. Isn't that what you really need?" The creature's laughter abruptly stopped. I felt its presence even closer now. Its breathing deepened, becoming more ragged, as if it had begun to truly listen. "And what is it you're proposing, human?" His voice was filled with disdain, but I caught a spark of interest. "Do you think you can make this more entertaining for me?" He moved so close that I could feel his hot breath on my skin. Every muscle in my body was tense, but I tried not to show any fear. "As I said, 5 names, it's too simple," I began, doing my best to remain calm. "I'm offering you something more fitting for a true hunter. I won't give you names. That would be too primitive for you, wouldn't it?" His breathing was heavy. I could picture him standing over me, mocking me silently. He was sure that he was playing with me, that I was just a pathetic victim. "Don't waste my time." His voice was still full of mockery, but the interest was growing clearer. "Riddles," I said, trying to add confidence to my voice. "You like riddles, don't you? I won't give you names, I'll give you descriptions. Their habits, their weaknesses, their personalities. You'll have to find them yourself, among thousands. A real hunt. Not 5 names, but 10. 10 victims. But you'll have to track them down." The werewolf couldn't help but laugh again, but this time the laugh was different. It was rougher, less assured. "You human," he said, moving closer to me. "You're offering me the task of searching for them across the world? Do you think I'll waste my time on that?" I took a deep breath. This was the moment of truth. If I miscalculated, he would kill me right here and now. "You said yourself you want entertainment," I pressed on, feeling bolder. "You don't want to follow a simple path like some predetermined route. You want a challenge that will make you think, hunt, search. This will be a challenge worthy of you. I'll give you clues that will make this the most interesting hunt of your life. Every step will be a puzzle you'll have to solve. It'll be much more exciting than just hearing names." The werewolf fell silent. I couldn't see him, but I knew he was considering my words. He finally said, and there was a note of interest in his voice. "You're offering me a game I've never played. Riddles? Interesting. But if I agree, do you think I'll let you live to see the end of this game?" I gathered all my strength to hide my fear. This was my only chance. "You won't be able to finish the game without me," I said confidently. "I'll be your guide. Without me, you won't find your prey. Isn't that the best kind of game for you?" Now the silence was complete. The beast was thinking. I knew I couldn't afford a single mistake. Suddenly, I felt his breath on my neck, hot and foul, reeking of decay. In that moment, I felt his wet tongue slowly slide across my cheek. A second stretched into an eternity. My heart pounded in my chest and cold sweat beaded on my forehead. His jaws were so close that I could feel every jagged edge of his sharp teeth, every sinister breath. The stench from his mouth was unbearable, a mix of rot and blood. My body turned to stone, every movement impossible. The beast let out a low, guttural laugh, and the sound crawled across my skin like the blade of a knife. "You're interesting, human," he said quietly, but his voice was laced with amusement, as though my predicament brought him pleasure. "It's been so long since someone offered me something so unusual." He bared his teeth again so close that I felt one of them graze my ear. My body tensed, bracing for pain. But he didn't attack. Instead, the werewolf laughed louder, suddenly pulling back. "Fine," he said, mockery thick in his voice. I'll play along with your game. Do you really think you can deceive me? You, a pathetic human, think you can lead the game against me?" He paused, and I heard his heavy paws pacing across the floor. He was enjoying this. "But I'll give you a chance." His voice turned softer, almost playful. "I'm playing. But don't think this is a gift. It's mercy. I'm giving you the opportunity to show me what you're capable of. And remember, if at any point I feel you're stalling or trying to trick me, your sister, your friend, everyone you care about will die." He suddenly leaned in closer, licking my face again, leaving behind a cold trail of vile saliva. "Do you understand?" he whispered, so close that I could feel his rancid breath on my face again. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, feeling the icy terror flood my entire being. "Excellent," he growled, and laughed loudly as he pulled back. "Until our next meeting, don't disappoint me." Then I heard his footsteps fade away, and the silence of the room swallowed me once again. I couldn't afford to make a mistake. The werewolf would return. He would want to hear more descriptions of the people I offered. But that wasn't the most terrifying part. The most terrifying part was that I had to come up with a plan, a way to get rid of him. I had to find a way out of this trap. Every thought, every idea seemed either too simple or too risky. How could I escape from a creature that not only stalked me in real life but had already invaded my dreams? How could I hide from something that was always there, breathing down my neck, watching every move I made? The beast appeared to be a dog, but his mind was far beyond that of an ordinary animal. He understood my fears, sensed my thoughts, predicted my actions. I had to be careful not to reveal my intentions, not to let him know I was trying to get rid of him. But how? How could I act when this creature never left my side? I knew I had to create descriptions of people who could captivate him. But what would catch this predator's attention? What kind of people would turn this hunt into a true challenge for him? The beast spoke of sacrifices, but these weren't just murders for sustenance. He enjoyed the game. I had to give him something more than just physical descriptions. Fragments of thoughts swirled in my mind. I needed to play to his passion for the hunt, his obsessive love for the game. I had to offer him victims who could entertain him, but at the same time give me the time I needed to plan. Maybe I could find people capable of resisting him. People who might even be able to destroy him. It was a risky plan, but I had no other choice. There was no doubt he was a werewolf and not just a predator, but a maniac. I had to offer him something extraordinary, something that would consume his attention, something that would slowly eat away at him, distracting him from me. But how to create these images? What kind of people should they be? I thought back to the different types of people I had encountered in my life. All of this had to be ready by the next night. I had only one day, not just to survive, but to start the game I had proposed. The werewolf was waiting, and if I wasn't ready, it would be the end. The end of the first part. The second part of the story is in progress. Please be patient. Thank you.
Story 2.
Ted entered the house with hopes of finally seeking refuge from the unbearable street heat within the cool walls. He promptly made his way to the kitchen, swung open the refrigerator, and fetched a life-saving cold soda. Leaving his bag of thick notebooks with play scripts upstairs in his room, he wiped away the beads of sweat from his glistening forehead and descended the stairs, traversing the corridor into the wide, spacious hall, and flopped onto the couch, taking a sip of the cool, fizzing, almost magical drink. He reminisced about his plans, anticipating the unforgettable weekend ahead after a grueling week at the theater club. Rehearsals upon rehearsals, he was tired of reciting monologues repeatedly. Glancing at the wall clock, it read 4 in the afternoon. Mom would be back from work soon. Dad wouldn't be home until late in the evening. For 2 whole months now, the unrelenting heat had tormented the residents of the small town. Summer had arrived earlier than expected this year, and if you discounted the almost 1.5 months until its logical conclusion, you could confidently declare it a success. The Fletcher household, unremarkable and no better or worse than the rest, nestled away from the bustling city center with its high-rise buildings, was situated on the southwest outskirts of town. A convenient spot in close proximity to nature and removed from the pulsating central hubs, prone to boiling over with inevitable incidents. Ted lived with his parents and had yet to contemplate separating, despite his almost adult age. He was turning 18. He hadn't seriously thought about needing a girlfriend and living a separate life soon. No. He enjoyed being free, leading a carefree, naive lifestyle, not demanding much from it. Since school, Ted had adored computer games and browsing the internet for interesting, engaging youth websites. He preferred entertaining and educational TV quizzes, where participants with high erudition were challenged with complex questions and elaborate answers. Right now, after the theater club, seeking refuge from the heat, inhaling freedom deeply, he caught the latest episode of his favorite show by turning on the television and flicking through channels. His mood lifted even more. "Mom, my friends and I from the club decided to spend the weekend out in nature." "How are your stage performances going?" Mrs. Susan's tired face, outlined with business-like features after a day's work, appeared. "Yeah, I'm not bad. We have a big premiere next week. You'll come, won't you, Mom?" "How could I miss that? And of course go. Have fun with your friends." "Maybe Dad will lend me the car?" "I'll talk to him," Susan encouraged. Ted beamed with a broad smile, approached his mother, and bestowed a grateful kiss on her cheek. "Just make sure it's without any adventures," she tenderly murmured. "Oh, by the way, where are you all going?" "To the river, probably," Ted said. His mother looked at him. Her eyes, on her slender face, peeking out from under not very long, thick black hair, immediately filled with seriousness. She stepped away from the stove, where she was preparing dinner, wiped her hands on her apron, took today's newspaper from the sideboard and handed it to her son. Watching his mother's movements, Ted moved his eyebrows in surprise. On the first page, under the heading Riverside Observer, he read, moving his eyes quickly over the large highlighted text. Then he turned his gaze back to his mother. "It's better to have a picnic somewhere else," Susan cautioned conclusively. "Oh, come on, Mom." Ted returned to his previous mood. "It's all fairy tales, yellow press fantasy. Mrs. Elizabeth said that park rangers advised against relaxing by the river. That cursed energy company ruined our entire ecology." "That company hasn't been around for over 3 years. It's all in the past," Ted interjected. "Mrs. Elizabeth says the river might be contaminated despite the company no longer operating and all those waste buried deep underground. And she also said that wild animals' roars can be heard at night there. Ted, my boy, maybe you'll go to another safer place." "Mom, the river skirts all the nearby forests. Where else can we go?" His smile took on a reproachful tone. "And all these newspapers will print anything to make more money. Mrs. Elizabeth talks a lot. I'm not sure her words can be trusted." "Teddy," Mom exclaimed. "Don't forget she's my close friend, and for God's sake be careful." Susan's voice rose slightly. Ted turned back to the newspaper, eyebrows furrowed. After a pause, he spoke again with the same sarcastic smile. "I'll be careful. How many times does a person need to get burned before stepping onto the right, correct path, which, being the only one, will lead to the fulfillment of all the hidden desires in the subconscious? Dreams that, splashing out and skillfully intertwining with reality, make the heart race pleasantly and rejoice in everything around. Sometimes, to achieve a certain desired goal, one needs to spend half a lifetime, or even a whole life. It happens that fate is incredibly benevolent to you and allows you to get what you've been searching for so long right away. But then there are these so-called changes, when at a certain moment a person closes their eyes to their future, and the futurist living within gives way to an involuntary realist. So what of all this can be classified as normal, an object of sane views and morals? The first, the second, the third, or maybe all options at once. Everyone thinks and reasons in their own way, choosing just one thing. But invariably, at the same time, driving through the creaky, grinding gears of the mind all other milestones. In Ted's mind, the creaky mechanism was still at rest and not ready for work, the beginning of which would signify a leap into a greater life. On the night before the trip, Ted, as usual, stayed up late on his computer. Navigating the vast expanses of the global network, amidst numerous open chat windows, he accidentally clicked on a headline leading to the hot news page. Before his eyes appeared the very introduction to the article his mother had been reading. The guy irritably looked away, then sighed, and without any interest scrolled down, causing line after line, paragraph after paragraph to appear until he reached the end of the text. The article provided a complete description of the genesis, progression, and downfall of the ominous private energy company that illegally disposed of industrial waste. Scandals, lawsuits, ultimately millions in damages, and the company's closure. However, the article concealed some of the nomenclature of these very toxic substances used for recycling secondary materials and which were once stored in the institution's warehouse. Ted's attention was focused on the citizens' call not to approach the burial site, on specialists conducting a full survey of the surrounding area, and on the possible reburial of containers with hazardous contents if necessary. His reading was interrupted by a shadow flickering outside the window. He rose from the computer, walked over, leaned on the windowsill. The huge moon, peering through the branches of the trees growing near the house, silvered the merging darkness. After gazing for a while at the night landscape presented in indistinct tones, taking a gulp of pleasant, cool air, Ted closed the open window of the second floor. Police officer Eric Morgan, investigating a series of mysterious savage murders, followed the duty nurse into the hospital room of the only surviving victim and witness of the crimes. Before him, as he expected to see, lying in the bed, already conscious after undergoing surgery, was 19-year-old Amanda Foster. The man averted his gaze from the injured girl, nodded to the nurse in gratitude, and she quietly left. Eric approached the bed, sat on the nearby chair, and after a pause spoke softly. "Amanda." The girl slowly opened her eyes. Her tired, pained gaze fell on the man. "I'm from the police. How do you feel? Are you able to talk? Can you tell me what happened?" he said calmly and evenly, not taking his eyes off her. Amanda, her weakness evident from head to toe, spoke softly. "After what I tell you, they'll put me in a psychiatric clinic." "You won't be put anywhere, I promise. Everything will be fine." The man's voice sounded soft and confident. She smiled gratefully, then tears welled up in her eyes. Sobs interrupted her speech. "At first I didn't understand where it came from, but later we realized that it was him." Now calm down, dear." Eric touched her hand. "There's no need to delve into the details. Just describe the killer. His face, appearance, age, If you remember, of course." The girl looked at the man again. She collected her thoughts and slowly began her story. Upon its completion, the police officer felt an internal discomfort from the lost confidence. On that day, after lunch, Ted Fletcher, along with other actors from the theater club, pulled up in an old pickup truck to her house at the agreed-upon time. Smiling, Amanda came out onto the street, dragging along 2 backpacks, one personal and the other with shared kitchen supplies that the guys had gathered together. Ted and his friend Lucas stepped out of the car, greeted Amanda, and helped her load her belongings into the trunk along with the other bags of personal clothing for each of the trip participants. Ted gallantly opened the rear door for Amanda, and upon hearing words of gratitude, he smiled in a businesslike manner, nodding in response. Those sitting inside crowded around, welcoming the actress with joyful greetings and hugs. Ted took the wheel, started the car, and they set off on their journey. "Listen," said Lucas, settled on the front seat to the right, holding a cigarette in one hand and constantly flicking ash out the open window, and an open beer can from the glove compartment in the other. "Have you heard anything about that energy company that got shut down? I heard from my uncle that it was all just a cover. Behind the scenes, there was actually a secret laboratory." Ted glanced at him and involuntarily smiled, seeing how his companion almost choked on a hearty sip from the can when the car wheels hit the small potholes in the asphalt. Laughter erupted from the back. "You're gonna spray the windshield with your spit?" "Yeah, thanks." Lucas tossed the empty can out the window. He was the tallest in the group, and, in addition, the skinniest of them all. Added to his mood-lifting appearance was his knack for humor, a walking anecdote. His humor was resourceful for any occasion, even though he often received reprimands from the director for improvising. However, sometimes his improvisations were actually good and very witty. That's why everyone in the troupe loved him. Now he was carefully and hastily trying to wipe beer drops off his colorful short-sleeve shirt, saying, "Ted, why are you so hard on me? Am I annoying you?" "It's not me, it's the road. There are a lot of potholes ahead," the guy behind the wheel said. "Let's assume I believe you. What was I talking about? Oh yeah. This company was hiding that they were experimenting on animals in their lab." Lucas continued his story. "You're not familiar with Mrs. Elizabeth, Lucas?" Ted suddenly interjected. "What? Mrs. Elizabeth, the baker's wife?" Lucas didn't understand. "No, it's not her. Just forget it. Keep telling your story. Everyone's listening to you attentively," Ted said sarcastically. "Listen, Lucas," Harry Parker's voice came from the back. "What did they dump in the river?" "That's the interesting part. My uncle said that nobody intentionally dumped anything into the river. When the company got shut down, the employees buried all the experiments, developing medicines, dead animals, all the waste, somewhere nearby, and somehow supposedly contaminated the area," Lucas clarified. "This is terrible. The river's dirty, and I'm not going to swim there. I want to warn you right away. And I won't let those cute nymphs go there either." Harry smirked arrogantly and hugged the girls sitting next to him. They giggled sympathetically. "Behave yourselves, and don't drink too much. Cops might show up, ask us to leave the place." "We'll have to go home," the driver suddenly said. "You're a pessimist, Ted," Harry blurted out. "We can always find another place. And if we can't, we'll find the optimal solution. We'll camp right on the road, but no one will ruin our weekend." The interior of the car was filled with laughter. "Great plan. I can hardly wait," Ted sarcastically replied, adjusting the rearview mirror. It was about an hour's drive from the city to the depths of the surrounding forest. None of the passengers, nor the driver, could boast of frequently putting off all business and heading into nature. and the contaminated river was well known to the residents of the nearby areas, although it didn't have a clear name and was inconspicuous and small. Ted turned onto a wide trail, occasionally traversed by other occasional visitors and tourists. It practically led to the river itself, and the guy had been here before when he went with his father. The further the car moved into the depths of the green walls, the more impressive and wild the forest corridor seemed, exuding the pleasant damp scent of summer and the refreshing coolness that saved from the heat. Soon the trail disappeared, announcing a green dead end and turning into a wide clearing. I don't see any contaminated zone here. I've heard a lot about these places. But what I see is just a regular forest. Maybe all these warnings are just to deter poachers, Lucas asked, nervously laughing after his statement. Either way, we've arrived, Harry mused, scanning the treetops and dense, seemingly almost impassable thickets. Ted got out of the car and surveyed the clearing. Perfect. This is where we'll set up our tents. Indeed, a suitable spot. He heard Lauren's voice behind him, as she linked her arm with his. It's a shame we don't get to gather with our group like this more often. Exactly, Ted said. At that moment, he suddenly thought that Lauren sympathized with him more than with others. And from this, his heart raced with joy. After all, even on stage, when he looked at her among other actresses, he often had the same thought, that only she could bring him happiness or unbearable sorrow. Sometimes it seemed to him that she paid more attention to other guys in the acting troupe. But, on the other hand, Lauren rarely could casually take someone's hand or hug them like this. Such behavior from her was only observed towards the closest friends of the opposite sex. Amanda and Emily, whose voices were now a little further away and occasionally dissolved into ringing laughter in response to Harry and Lucas's jokes, were much simpler than Lauren. Although in beauty and intelligence they were not inferior to her and secretly drove many actors crazy, dreaming of winning the favor of these girls. Harry Parker was about the same height as Ted, and both of them from their group liked one girl, Lauren. Parker tried in every way to present himself to the girl in the best light, courted her, gave her gifts, repeatedly invited her to the movies. But for now, she mostly maintained a neutral position. She didn't promise anything, but she didn't reject his courtship either. Harry really wanted to date her. He took care of himself. He constantly worked on his body shape, dedicated himself to sports training, and the gym was his second home, where he achieved great results. Furthermore, he often frequented hair salons, ensuring that his overgrown hair did not detract from his appearance of courage, and 100% belonging to a true athlete. Now, as he helped to retrieve everything necessary for the picnic from the car, he kept glancing at Lauren whenever he had the chance. But the girl didn't leave this attention unreciprocated, and at one beautiful moment slipped away, moving towards Ted. At that moment, Lucas lay down on the grass and began to watch the rare clouds in the sky. "How long are you planning to laze around?" Amanda addressed him. "Yeah, I'm ready to fall asleep like an ordinary medieval traveler," Lucas replied, smiling, understanding the hint. The hot day gradually gave way to a cool night, permeated with the same aroma of wild thickets and berries. The moon had already emerged in the clear sky, peeking through the treetops, and a visible array of countless stars appeared over the clearing. The campers settled around the campfire, finishing off the sandwiches they had brought with them and listening to Lucas's story. Being the livelier one among the group, he decided to scare the others before bedtime with some scary tale. And since he was a big fan of the writer Stephen King and had reread most of his works, he decided to retell one of the most memorable stories without mentioning the author's name, so as not to distract the audience. The story was called The Cat. and was about an old man who wanted to get rid of his cat. It was possessed by a demon, which at the most unexpected moment turned the animal into a werewolf and killed people. And about how this old man hired a hitman for this very cat, fearing to approach it himself. He paid a tidy sum and had the pet taken far away while it was in a dormant state and disposed of. And then this creature woke up right in the car of the astonished killer. A professional, and what atrocities it committed with him. Lucas recounted, naturally mentioning all the bloody details and embellishing, as storytellers usually do, keeping the listeners in suspense from beginning to end. Approaching the climax of the story and smiling as he noticed Amanda subtly leaning towards Harry and Lauren towards Ted, he glanced around looking for the third girl named Emily. He saw her sitting apart, finishing off the last bottle of soda. Emily returned to the campfire with a smile, apologizing for interrupting his thought. Lucas cast her a brief, smiling glance, and suddenly felt the desire to be alone with her. Her thick, light hair gathered back into a long ponytail. Her attractive appearance and slender figure spoke for themselves. And in Lucas, his feelings spoke of being overwhelmed by the copious amount of alcohol he had consumed. And after one more gulp from the can, he suddenly forgot what he had just been talking about. Licking his lips several times and scratching his nose, he guiltily asked, "What was I talking about? Oh yeah, the cat." Leaving the torn body of the man by the car that veered into the ditch, this creature swiftly disappeared into the field, as if it had some unfinished business. That's all. He tactfully shrugged. Harry and Ted laughed. Lucas smiled at first, then burst out laughing himself. "How can anyone read such things?" Amanda suddenly asked seriously. In a second or two, the unamused expression vanished from the faces of the other girls, and the atmosphere of merriment bubbled up again in each one. Only Amanda remained pensive about something. "Well, in that case, I'll tell you another short story. About a gangster," Lucas said, symbolically pulling out a miniature silver revolver from his belt, the kind that fits into any purse pocket and is convenient for self-defense. In the hospital. "Is that the revolver?" The policeman pulled the weapon, enclosed in a transparent bag, out of his pocket. "Yes," Amanda said. Her gaze was full of fear. At the first glance at the gun, reflecting glints of fire, Ted flinched at the thought that it was loaded with live ammunition, and the drunk Lucas waved it around carelessly while telling the story. "Lucas, where did you get it from? Borrowed it from my uncle? Are you out of your mind? What if we get caught by the police?" Ted continued. Lucas wanted to say something, but instead, a shot rang out into the ground, startling everyone. "What are you doing, you idiot? Give it to me!" Ted rushed towards him. "Are you going to shoot us all here?" The drunk Lucas started yelling something, reducing everything that had happened to just a prank. But Ted was determined to stand his ground and take the dangerous toy away from his friend. A brief struggle ensued, during which another shot rang out, making the frightened girls shriek. Suddenly a roar came from the forest thicket. A dead silence fell over the clearing. Everyone froze and stared into the darkness from where the sound was coming. At that moment, Ted, taking advantage of the situation, quickly took the gun from Lucas and gave him a stern look. No one expected that the next moment a dark creature would emerge from behind the trees and attack the armed guy. The beast literally knocked Ted to the ground. Another shot rang out. The creature bit into the guy's neck and just as quickly as it appeared, disappeared behind the trees. Everything happened so fast that for some time no one could understand exactly what had happened. Only when Lucas, staring in horror at his motionless friend, rushed to him with a cry of terror, did Harry jump off the ground and also run towards Ted. Turning him onto his back, they saw a lot of blood on his neck. The guy was dead. What? How did this happen? Oh my God, what just happened? Parker yelled in disbelief at the trembling Lucas, who seemed about to lose consciousness any moment. Sometime later, Harry continued to hold and comfort the shocked, tearful Amanda and Emily. Lauren sat by one of the tents, sobbing, covering her face with her palms. It all happened so fast. Lucas quietly repeated, sitting by the campfire, leaning his hands on his knees and rocking back and forth. What will happen to us? What now? We need to leave, and as soon as possible. Harry abruptly interrupted his whimpering. Lucas nodded and, frowning, closed his eyes. We need to get Ted's body into the car now, take him home and tell his parents everything. Lauren's indifferent voice came from afar. It's the only right decision. You're out of your mind, Lucas yelled. They'll kill us. I brought the weapon here, and if they find out, do you think Ted's parents will believe us that a beast attacked their son? They'll... What do you suggest? Harry reproached him. We need to leave the body here. Or better yet, throw it in the river, along with the weapon, and then report Ted missing to the police. Upon hearing this, Harry flew into a rage and lunged at him, pushing him onto his back and holding a clenched fist over him. Emily rushed after him. Harry, stop it, please. Fighting won't solve anything right now. Please stop. Please, she begged, shaking him by the shoulders from behind. He looked disdainfully into Lucas's eyes, still keeping his fist ready. In those very eyes of the once joker and life of the party, who had recently entertained his friends by the campfire with tall tales, now read fear, despair, and weakness. And when tears involuntarily rolled down those eyes, Harry's anger subsided slightly, and he let go of his friend, though still pushing him away with some disgust. We'll take Ted home and then we'll see what happens next. No, Lucas is right. We can't just ruin our entire future with one move. No one will believe us, Emily said. Harry, Lauren, and Amanda stared at her. We don't even know what will happen. His parents, our own parents, court, jail. We need to simplify everything. Ted won't come back. His life was cut short, but we still have our lives. And while we're discussing this here, we don't know when that beast will attack again, and we're wasting our time. Her words pierced the foggy consciousness of everyone present like a needle. They all, of course, realized that they might not be believed, and that if after the investigation they find bullet casings or the revolver, they might be taken for murderers. The decision was made, and it was simply explained by the primary instinct of self-preservation. At that moment, every member of the group, who set off on what turned into a nightmare vacation, forgot about everything else in the world. About everything, except for this most primal instinct. They decided not to think about what awaited them tomorrow, in a month, a year, 5 years, and even for a while forgot that somewhere nearby, the beast was lurking. When Harry and Lucas dragged Ted's body to the river, they noticed something new, adding fuel to the already burning fire of their criminal thoughts. A police car stood half in the water, half on the shore. The windshield was covered in a web of fine cracks, formed by powerful blows. The side windows were completely smashed. "What's going on here?" Lucas's voice oozed with fear. "I don't know. But I don't think the police, who left the vehicle here, are hanging around nearby," Harry replied. Sometime later, they returned to the parking spot. "They dumped the body in the river?" The policeman sitting next to Amanda in the hospital clarified. "Yes," the girl replied. "Continue with what happened next," Eric requested. Emily, Amanda, Lauren, Lucas, Harry, they all looked at each other, still disbelieving what had happened with their eyes. "What now?" Amanda asked listlessly. "Now we need to go to the town and report his disappearance to the police, of course, concocting a convincing story that we saw a wild beast," Lucas declared categorically. "And not a word about the weapon." Emily shook her head. Harry approached Amanda and hugged her. Nestling into his chest, she burst into tears again. "We'd better get out of here now. We've lingered for too long." Emily summed up everything. And so they did. In the darkness of the night, they began to pack up their tents and other belongings. Although they had decided to head back, they couldn't force themselves to leave the forest. Their conscience gnawed at them from within, eating away at their hearts and souls. Moreover, they discussed the smashed police car by the river. What was really going on here? Could the police, even if injured in a confrontation with potential enemies, simply abandon their service vehicle like that? Perhaps there was another explanation. Criminals dealt with the law enforcement officers, hid their bodies somewhere, and abandoned the car in the bushes. But in that case, this place would now be swarming with search teams looking for their colleagues. In general, the comprehensive answer to all questions now amounted to zero. And the 5 travelers finally decided to get out of here as far as possible. Tormented by various thoughts that wouldn't let her go, Lauren, with sadness in her eyes and heart, numbly watched her friends gathering their belongings into the car. Why did it have to happen to her? The event that tore her apart from the inside, causing her heart to break into pieces. She took a step, then another towards the camp, when suddenly she thought she heard some movement in the depths of the thickets. She stopped, listened. No, it wasn't hallucinations. She distinctly heard someone approaching, rustling through the dry stems of wild plants and branches. Again, that dark beast. But then the rustling stopped, as if teasing her. No, it wasn't a beast. It would have attacked her. It was someone else. She quickly headed towards the car, where the others were standing ready to leave, and grabbed a flashlight from inside. "What are you doing?" Harry asked. "I'll be right back," Lauren replied, and headed towards the thicket, towards which the car's headlights were directed. She moved along a narrow, barely visible path through the thickets, which the guys used to go to the river. She aimed the flashlight in different directions, hoping to illuminate the wounded police officer. Unlike her friends, whom she now considered former friends, Lauren wanted everyone to know what had happened, and she wasn't going to hide the events of this night from the police. However, she couldn't say it to the others. Otherwise, she might also end up in the river. Emily was ready to do anything for that idiot Lucas. She decided to find the policeman who might have been nearby. A couple of times Lauren even called out. But the response was an exhausting silence, interrupted only by the distant, indistinct voices of the young people near the car. Unnoticed by herself, the girl walked down to the river. The police car was exactly where the guys described it. But there was no one around. The quiet murmuring of the running water in the darkness was the only thing present here now. Although, no. Lauren, startled, heard someone's heavy, deep breathing to her right. The beam of the flashlight reflected in someone's gigantic, wild eyes. A strong, clawed paw strike. Lauren's blood gushing from her torn throat. "Where is she?" Harry exclaimed nervously. "I'll go after her," Lucas said, climbing out of the car. As soon as he approached the grove, something leaped out at him from the bushes. Seeing this, Harry sprang out of the car, but then stopped when he realized that his friend was beyond saving. And the indescribably terrifying creature, clenching its blood-stained, unnaturally long fangs, mesmerizingly stared at the guy. The latter recoiled, back into the cabin, slammed the door, and, amid the screams of the shocked girls once again, started the car abruptly. turned it around with the same zeal, chased it down the trail back to the main highway. What? What was that? Emily exclaimed in hysteria. I don't know. But it's definitely not an animal. It's something worse, and we need to get out of here. As far away as possible, Harry nervously replied. And where did you go? Home? The policeman broke the long pause. Yeah, home to Ted's. Harry decided on the road to change the plan, and that it was better to blame it on Lucas and the creature in the woods, although Emily was against it. We drove to the Fletcher house and told Ted's parents about the creature, the deaths of our comrades, the weapon, and the fact that Lucas had brought it, Lauren explained. The car was parked at the house. People flickered in the illuminated windows now and then. In the darkness of the remote surroundings, beyond the reach of the blanket of light pouring from the lantern hanging under the roof of the house, it now dwelled. That same feeling of an impending burden of inevitability of some new event. The smell of fear and anxiety permeated the air here, near the house, as soon as the car pulled up. The neighboring cottages, located from different sides, whose outlines in the darkness resembled gray, towering rocks, seemed to have been deserted for a long time. As usual, people in them either had already gone to bed due to the late hour, or had left for the city for a while. In different parts of the world, sometimes unimaginable, fantastic things happen, witnessing which, a person involuntarily risks ending up in a mental institution. And right now, the story of 3 frightened young people really resembled nonsense that only a lunatic would tell. But nevertheless, David Fletcher, having made his wife sit down and calm down, instructed the young people to tell the truth as it was, no matter how absurd their story might seem. And when Harry finished, Ted's father stood up from his chair and, looking once again at all 3 of them, with a smile that did not hide the seriousness in his eyes, asked, "And now, the truth. What were you drinking?" "David," his wife exclaimed angrily, already through tears. "What?" he burst out in response. Then, regaining his composure, he said, "I'll call the sheriff. Let him sort it out," David declared. "Do you not believe us?" Emily asked weakly. The man gave her a stern look, and she immediately lowered her moist eyes. He grabbed his phone. He was about to dial the number of the police station, but didn't hear a dial tone. "The connection isn't working," he muttered nervously. "When will they fix that damn antenna?" Susan said, her eyes fixed on the young people, just like her husband, not believing their story. Although she realized that something had happened, right there, in the forest, by the river. Something terrible, if not worse. Maybe Teddy was really dead. She covered her face with her hands. "I'll go to the sheriff," David said, stepping outside the kitchen and opening the front door. Suddenly, a horrifying, choking scream pierced the air. Everyone rushed into the corridor and found themselves in the hall in a heartbeat. Harry's heart pounded like a machine gun when he heard women's screams again and saw ahead the monster. The same one that tore Lucas apart in the forest, and now was here, in the house, next to David Fletcher, convulsing in a pool of his own blood. It was something. Huge, insane, bulging yellow eyes burned with wild rage as they surveyed the people, choosing a new victim. The creature, covered in dense fur, vaguely resembled a human. But calling it human was difficult. What stood before the stunned onlookers was the result of an unimaginable mutation of a huge dog or wolf. The skin on the creature's body looked tough and black. Where there was no skin and fur, everything was covered in meaty, uneven lumps of dried blood and protruding tendons. The head, or rather its upper half, was gigantic in proportion to a human's. It was covered in dead, sagging skin, forming dreadful folds on the temples. Long, yellow upper and lower fangs protruded from the visible gums of its mouth like sharp spikes. The other teeth, visible in the animal's grimace, resembled thick, long needles that converged in the mouth, leaving gaps between them. The creature's paws were one continuous undulating tumor, each merging into 3 thick fingers with sharp black claws. Its legs, similar in appearance but longer and comparatively bulkier, supported all this horror. They ended in a foot with 4 huge protrusions, each adorned with equally disgusting curled claws. The creature moved like a human, on 2 hind legs. Large animal nostrils pulsed, repeatedly inhaling the air. In height, the creature exceeded an adult human. The monster, slightly hunched over, approached slowly, blinking its eyes from time to time and emitting long, blood-curdling sounds. They began with a hiss and turned into a guttural moan and roar. "What is this? Oh God, what is this?" Susan, choking back tears and clutching the girls to herself, repeated. The intruder, as if hypnotizing, shifted its gaze from one terrified, petrified face to another. At the same time, it moved its disgustingly large jaws smoothly. "Teddy!" Amanda exclaimed. "Teddy, can you hear me?" Everyone in the room stared at her in confusion. "Why did you assume it was him?" the policeman asked, squinting. "Because only now did I notice the dirty silver bracelet on the creature's right paw, which Ted never parted with. Neither at the theater club nor at home," the girl replied. "It was him. I know." Then Harry rushed back to the kitchen and, finding a huge cleaver on the table, returned. He shielded the woman, assuming a defensive stance, and threatening the beast with the cold weapon, shouted, trying to hide his fear behind anger. "Don't come any closer, you monster." The monster paused. Wild, predatory fire blazed in its physiognomy. Copious saliva dripped from its fangs onto the floor. The room was increasingly filled with the acrid smell of toxins, chemicals, and decay. Susan, taking cautious steps and never taking her eyes off the distracted creature due to Harry's antics, began to retreat towards the stairs. Meanwhile, the guy, gripping the knife handle tightly in his hand and constantly wiping away the sweat stinging his eyes, had now turned into a wild, raging animal inside. He was ready to rush into battle at any moment. Finally, his patience snapped, and muttering, "Goodbye, Ted," he agilely lunged at the enemy, swinging the chopping tool. But as if anticipating his action, the beast thrust its paw forward. The cleaver fell to the floor with a metallic clang. Then immediately, Harry's head rolled across the floor, hitting the bottom wooden step right at Susan's feet, who screamed at the top of her lungs and ran up the stairs. Emily, on the other hand, without realizing her actions anymore, rushed to the door after the splatter of bloody droplets, splashing her from head to toe. "Emily, be careful! Watch out!" Amanda screamed, seeing how the creature caught up with her best friend with one giant leap, and afterwards tore her apart. After about 3 minutes, which felt like hours, Amanda, standing motionless and pale as chalk, saw the creature detach itself from the mutilated body, licking its long, agile tongue over its red fangs. The gaze of its ugly, glowing, still hungry eyes, devoid of anything positive, fell on the last remaining victim. The menacing new snarl spoke of a new imminent leap that would put an end to all this bloody event. The girl stood there, unable to move or avert her gaze, pouring a doomed look at the hellspawn, and already mentally bidding farewell to life. Although at that moment, she could hardly think of anything at all. The thunderous gunshot made her flinch. When she saw the creature collapse on the floor next to the deceased Emily, Amanda, now awakened from the trance, turned towards the stairs. At its base stood Susan, holding a weapon with a smoking barrel in her hands. Die, monster, the woman murmured, pulling the trigger. The ejected bullet casing clattered to the floor. The woman slowly, step by step, as if fearing that any loud noise might revive the monster, approached Amanda and embraced her with one hand. The motionless, terrifying enemy now resembled an overturned werewolf dummy from fantasy movies. Susan released the girl from her embrace, approached the sprawled creature, and delivered a final shot to its repulsive face, whose fiery eyes still stared motionless at the ceiling. Now, calmly, the woman returned to Amanda, who was still on the verge of fainting. Triumphantly, she took her by the hand and led her to the door. As soon as they stepped outside and took in a breath of fresh air, the girl, slowly but stuttering, looked at the disheveled hair and pale face of her savior and asked, "What are we going to do now?" Susan, after thinking for a moment, couldn't find anything to say, so she hugged Amanda tightly, dropping the weapon to the ground. A couple of seconds passed, and Amanda felt a lightning bolt of pain shoot through her left side, knocking her off her feet. She had no strength left to scream, and her silent cries spilled out in a new wave of warm tears. Crawling forward, grabbing the weapon, she looked back when Mrs. Susan's long scream stopped. At the door, dropping to all fours, the same unvanquished predatory beast sank its huge fangs into her flesh, tearing it apart with a crunch. Amanda gathered her last strength and began to shoot accurately, jerking the clicking bolt and pulling the trigger, straight into the vile head and torso. After a few minutes, following a powerful barrage of shots, the creature, blood spraying in all directions, disappeared into the doorway. Then inside, there was one final, almost deathly, beastly cry. Amanda gritted her teeth and, tossing the weapon aside, burst into loud sobs. Strips of bloody skin hung from her torn thigh. She lost consciousness. But before that, she heard the approaching sirens. For a couple of minutes, the girl silently looked at the police officer, indicating by this that she had finished her story and waiting for his reaction. Eric, lost in thought, averted his gaze. Then, with professional calmness, he reached into his pocket, pulled out the bracelet, and asked, "Is this it?" "Yes," the girl replied in the same weak voice. "Oh, by the way, did you find the body?" "The monster?" the policeman interrupted her. She nodded. "No," he said apologetically, staring guiltily at the silver chain in his hand. "Don't you believe me?" Her smile was more of a pleading grimace. "Rest, Amanda. You need to regain your strength." "Thank you. Rest and don't think about anything," he said, as he slowly got up from his chair and headed for the door. "Don't you believe me?" she repeated word for word, raising her voice. Eric stopped. He turned around and succinctly stated, "I believe you." He paused and repeated, nodding slightly, "I believe you." After all, we found the remains of police officers not far from their car, the same one that crashed into the river. According to our experts, they were attacked by some enraged predatory animal. It happened before you even entered the forest. But now I have a new version to consider. So everything's fine. Thanks again. He smiled and left the room. This case was never solved.